rice, my favorite subject. We watch the rest of the world markets, but rice is the main one. I've given this talk in several places in the US and overseas. Most recently in Thailand, I was the keynote speaker at the 4-year rice conference, and I came out with a lot more information and knowledge than when I went in. So this has been revised since 2 weeks ago when I was in Bangkok. And I talked to most of the major traders and to the largest food company in Thailand. The last year has been really difficult on all of us. There's a quote that I came across recently. It says, life is a grindstone, but whether it grinds us down or polishes us up depends on us. And I think of rice as a polished crop. It's the only agricultural crop that really gets polished. A friend of mine today said, well, there's brown rice, but it's not a big part of the deal. So all rice gets polished at some point. And I think our attitude is really very important as we move into this thing, because next year is going to be quite uncertain, more uncertain than this year. As a bit of background, I have a service that goes to buyers and sellers of rice, both in the South and California, and the time a year ago, back in January, I was allowing for the possibility that rice could go to $11. It was not at $11, and I told people to start looking at ways to protect themselves in this market. I'm talking long grain here. We're going to have a little talk on medium grain. And then we also said you ought to plant all the medium grain you can. With all deference to my California friends, it was something I was showing people that they could do to hedge. You can actually hedge by not growing long grain, but by growing medium grain. And I've been with my clients all day, and one of them is like a personal spiritual mentor to me, and he said that Emerson said to his buddy Henry David Thoreau, "What have you learned since we met the last time?" And that's a really good question. And if you ask that of people, you either discover that they've learned more or they haven't. In that particular case, I learned that quote. And I have learned a lot in the last 30 days about rice, I'm embarrassed to say. And I'm going to share that with you. So this is a transforming thing as I go along. I don't necessarily agree with the numbers, but I agree with Nathan. I think he's one of the best assets we have in the industry is his analytical abilities and that of the World Outlook Board. In the book, which I wrote, we're going to start off, and I'm going to give a little bit of basic stuff like Nathan did about the U.S. market for long grain, medium grain. And then what I'm going to do different is I'm going to get into megatrends, which is in the book, which we have tonight when you go by our booth 8. I can show you the book. But in the book, there's a Zen saying that the obstacle is the way. And I'm going to leave you with 2 slides at the end, if you're a long grain guy, a question. And I'll just let the 2 slides speak for themselves, but the obstacle is the way. Too many people say, I can't do that and I can't do this and it's not possible. But I'll tell you, perseverance is what makes a business go. It's not no obstacles. And everybody out there that's a businessman had to deal with them. We've had Turner grain in the South. We've had arsenic coming back. We've had GMO problems, particularly in corn, but also rice coming back. We've got rice considering methane gas and polluting things. In Austin, people want to water ski and don't want to give the farmers any water for their rice. Okay? By the way, I mentioned crude oil is going down. Crude oil is going down and the dollar is going up. Is that bearish on rice? Maybe, not necessarily. There's rice that has no connection to energy other than the cost of producing it. And in Asia, it doesn't cost anything to produce it, particularly in India, where you're going to see the prices are cheap. The question was asked about energy in India and China. I hope to unpack that for the gentleman over there a little bit as we get going down the line. But I would say this, that second quote, when you boil your rice, know that the water is your life, is at the essence of rice. It's all about water. You're irrigation experts. You are not just producers. You are in the water conversion business. Whether you're in the South or California, you elect to turn that water into rice. You could turn it into something else if you so desired. The original title of my talk was, Is Rice a Commodity? That is more a question in Asia than the US. It's definitely a commodity here. Farmers grow a crop and then they sell a commodity, okay? So maybe the question is, should I be involved in rice? Oh dear, what's going to happen to the long grain rice price in the next 12 months, which I'm sure you're all anxious about. And I will give some of my opinion. But like Nathan, I'll hedge it because it's still November, and I'll have a better knowledge in January. But the farm program is very important. I personally think acreage is going to leak into rice, long grain rice. California's a separate issue. My assistant Stuart will talk about that. Okay, so we're going to look at fundamentals for long and medium grain, similar to what Nathan did. We got some variance in our viewpoints on things, and we actually put up a spreadsheet for long grain for next year. We're willing to go out on a limb there. He can't go out on a limb till what, February, March, right? Yeah, so I've got him on one thing, and then I'll talk about megatrends. Okay. And keep your questions, sir, because I'm talking about China and India in particular. Long grain review, it's really simple. We're going to have more rice next year than we have this year in our view. We could be wrong. We think it could be up as much as 10%. I'm hearing higher from some of my clients. I have lots of clients in the long grain industry, and that's going to create larger carryover stocks and a lower price. But that doesn't necessarily mean the price is going to be low all next year, because I believe that there are dynamics going on in Asia that will change things dramatically. Okay, that's my view, is that things will change dramatically in the next 24 months. Exactly how that plays out, I'm not sure. For example, in India, well, let me hold off on India and China until we get done. So we're going to have more rice, and generally that goes to lower price. When we did the statistics this year, I thought the low would be about $11 on futures. It was $11.13 so far. So we weren't that far off. But people that got covered in cash, because you can forward sell in the South, and then also went into medium grain as an alternative. Medium grain is trading above long grain right now. So we helped those people that were willing to listen in January and February. And that's what we do. We try and get the market right. If you look at long grain stocks that we're estimating, they'll be much higher than last year, which is to Nathan's point. I'm so glad I got to hear his talk, because we're able to mesh better than we could before. And he doesn't think it'll be up that much, because where are we going to sell it? Well, if we got the price, we'll sell the rice. And it's also a question of what Asia's going to do. Because I think Asia's in motion. I don't think it's just set in place. I'm going to invite Stuart to come up here. Stuart is running our Chico office, and he'll talk a little about medium grain, since we promote medium grain as an alternative in this market.
Yeah, we'll just do a quick recap as to what we've seen happen in the last year and what we see happening moving forward. Kind of like what Nathan was saying too, world production of medium grain rice is down this year, and we're expecting to fall again next year. One of the big things we have going for us is that we're one of 5 or 6 countries that actually export medium grain rice, and so we do have a little bit less competition than the long grain folks do. That being said, Australia is expecting to reduce their crop again due to low reservoirs, like Nathan mentioned. Egypt, we make jokes every now and then about a long-term trade policy that they're looking at implementing, and a long-term trade policy in Egypt tends to be 5 to 7 days, oftentimes. And so it's very difficult to start budgeting and saying, well, Egypt's going to be doing this, doing that, let's not make any decisions. You almost have to make decisions with Egypt kind of on the burner. As far as Turkey goes, we have seen, we've definitely noticed the impact that the increased Jupiter production has had on our market. Like Milo mentioned, last year we were traveling around meeting with several clients and kind of explaining the deficit that we were having in California, largely due to the drought. And like Nathan also mentioned, the premium has already been largely calculated to the price. In fact, maybe even over-calculated based on what we're seeing right now. Like after paddy prices spiked in the spring, export prices I think peaked in June or July, and since then have come down quite a bit. It's going to be difficult to get those prices back up. Everybody wants to compare this year to 2008 and 2009 when the market exploded for us on the medium grain side, but I think we often forget that it also exploded on the long grain side as well. And so what we're seeing happen right now is that spread between medium grain and long grain get wider and wider. The wider that gets, the more substitution we're likely to see. And the more likely we are to see more medium grain acres go in the South next year. This year, when we saw the 60% increase in production in the South, based on what we're hearing from all the seed distributors, that was about as much as they could actually grow, just due to seed scarcity. This coming year, 15-16, we expect it could be up by as much as another 30%. I think that might be a little bit high, but somewhere down around 20% is definitely feasible, which would mean that they could be producing 25 million hundredweights compared to our 45 million hundredweights. This is just kind of to provide a quick display of where our carryout stock position is now and where we forecast it to be moving into moving through 14-15. We do think it'll be lower. even with the slower demand we've seen year to date. These slides are actually from a previous newsletter we wrote, so they are from about a month or two ago, I want to say, also from a different presentation we've given before. But again, it still highlights the same points we want to make, and that is just the fact that overall world production of medium grain is expected to decline in 14-15 and again in 15-16. I heard the question about water. As far as our analysis goes, right now our precipitation looks really, really good, but when you look at the charts, it's just above average. I think it just partly feels very, very good because we just had nothing last year. As the reservoirs do fill up, I think the last time I looked at them, they were between 23 and 25%, so we do have a ways to go, I think, before that positively impacts our acreage. I think it'll prevent us from losing acres, but for right now, I'm expecting to plant maybe 5,000 acres more, no more than that, so I'm leaving it relatively unchanged in our balance sheet. And so I do believe, actually, that medium grain acres are about 385,000 this year, 390, but with short grain, we're right around 420. That could change, or when we know more. But for now, we are budgeting into our next year's balance sheet about 425,000 acres, with the South also planting probably another 60,000 acres, give or take, I think is what that number came out to. And then I think it's back to Milo, but basically right now, just to recap real quick, we do see the cash market. I know there were some forward bookings last year that we advised a lot of growers to take advantage of. Now the paddy market has softened a little bit, and so we are definitely advising those who have not unloaded any rice to consider pricing some inventory before we get too far along. There are a lot of unknown factors in the market right now as far as South Korea. We know Taiwan's also looking at some southern rice for the first time and maybe ever. And so you definitely don't want to get stuck holding all of your rice, hoping for a price that may not quite come to fruition. But if there's any more questions about the medium grain rice, we'll be at the booth here later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, the interplay between medium and long grain is about as large as it's been in quite a few years because of the situation in California. And some of that acreage that we're expecting for long grain may actually leak over into medium grain. This is a price chart, annual price chart with closes during the month. And what we're suggesting is that, get a little Tinkerbell up here, that this year we'll be trading between $11 and $14. We're wound up like a top in the futures market. We got all the specs short and all the commercials are long. And it reminds me very much of wheat or soybeans before they made a move to the upside. I'm definitely telling people to take advantage of that if it happens, because the futures will lift the cash market up. Farmers are not selling a lot of rice right now. That's why the receipts are not building on the exchange. It's very bullish from that point of view. Over here, next year, we're forecasting a very volatile market. To the downside, if our forecast is correct for long grain, maybe down as low as $10. This time last year, we were forecasting a low of $11. You have to understand that doesn't mean it'll stay there, but you have the risk on the downside of another $1.50 down in the futures market. The following year, I'm very bullish, and I don't quite know how that's going to play itself out. Timing is everything. But the main thing is that we look at the market differently than anybody else, and the rest of my talk is about why I look at the market differently, okay? Can you hear me in the back? Larry, can you hear me okay? I've written a book called When Rice Shakes the World. It's a melodramatic title. It comes from a quote from Napoleon Bonaparte, who said, China sleeps. Let her sleep. Because when she wakes, she'll shake the world. Actually, it's not China, but the rice they grow that I think is going to change things. For a number of different reasons. One of the economists that read this book said, it's not about rice, Milo, and I said, that's correct. It's about water, and it's about migration, and all the stuff that's going on now. In duplicate in Asia. Everything I got out of Asia confirms what I said from the Chinese and Indian people and from the Thais about what's going on under the surface. No one wants to talk about it. A lot of PR, okay? I've got copies of the book if you want one. Come on by tonight at the reception, and I will talk to you and offer your book. What I'm going to do now is talk about what is rice, the Great Wall, water's everything. China and India, what they call Chindia, lacks water. India's really bad off. China's sort of bad off. And the last two slides address rice futures are the key to trade in the U.S. long grain, not medium grain, long grain market, okay? Okay. So here I'm going to ask a question, and I've got a goodie. I didn't bring them with me, unfortunately, but about a question. And anyone's read the book can't say anything, okay? So What is the cement of the Great Wall of China made out of? Has anyone seen the Great Wall? Has it been to the Great Wall? What is that cement that holds the wall together? Any suggestions?
Rice.
Who said that? You're right, you get a free book. You come back during the reception, you get my free book. In every crowd, I was in Asia, I was with experts from all over Asia and the world, and only one person got it right. And that's generally the case. In fact, it is correct. The rice is held together, the wall is held together with rice, sticky rice and rice hull ash. Even if this wasn't true, I'd lie about it. Because it says what rice is. We've got a lot of travelers into Asia back there, and they're Californians. They're people that have been in Asia. If you're in California, you got to go all over Asia. If you're in the South, you don't have to go to Asia necessarily. But if you're in rice in California, you got to go to Asia. And it is a cultural symbol, military symbol. It is a symbol of what rice is. And we can't conceive of it. It'd be like saying broccoli held the U.S. economy together or something. I don't know what would be the equivalent. There'd be no equivalent in the U.S. Rice feeds 3 billion people. One Asian rice farm feeds 20 people. One U.S. farm feeds 150 people. It doesn't mean because the farmers are incompetent over there. They just don't have the land and the access and the facilities. 70% of all the water, sir, used in China, and irrigated water goes to rice in China. Rice takes twice as much water, twice as much labor as any other crop, okay? And it has nothing to do with energy, because the price of energy in Asia is highly subsidized, particularly in India, where it costs almost nothing. So if the crude oil price goes to $30, it doesn't change their production cost. Visualize that, okay? They're going to feed an extra 400 million people. I'm about to talk about that. Inside of India, they've already started. They say their domestic consumption's not going up. I don't believe them. I've gotten reports recently that up to 6 million tons of rice inside of India has been lost. They can't find it. So when we talk statistics on India, be very careful. Also, the Indian experts that talked in Bangkok 2 weeks ago say the crop's under 100 million. And we're saying it's over 100 million. So you start digging the supplies, digging that kind of thing. I am very much of the view that India exports will be mostly aromatics or basmati. That's a very high price rice. It's not even, it's like California rice. It's hardly even rice, it's something else. 250 million farmers will move into the cities. Do you realize what that means? In the next 15 years. It took us 60 years for African Americans to move from the south of the US into the northern industrial belt, and that was 7 million people. We're talking 15 million a year moving, in motion, not going back. China will eventually allow farmers to control their land. That is a huge change. That's all happened in the last year. These are fundamental, world-changing events. A guy named Stiglitz said, the two keys to the 21st century are US technology and China urbanization. I'd say the third one is all of this stuff happening to the farmers out there. This is as important as what's happening with the urbanization in China. These are not small issues. 3 billion people are going to get smartphones inside Asia. 3 billion people that do not now have smartphones will get them over the next 5 years. This is China. It is a large area. This was taken after thousands of years of civil war. There are 2 rivers, only one's navigable, and that's the Yangtze River. All of the people are in the north, to sum it up, all the agriculture's in the south, so they're going to move it north. They're going to move the water north. The biggest single undertaking of a hydro project in human history. It's underway, it's already started. But what they're doing is kicking the can down the road. They don't get the water problem, they put it in the south. Not only do they put it in the south, but all of that area is where they export 70–80% of the world's rice. And the headwaters of all those rivers are in an area called Tibet, which the Chinese refer to as our Western treasure house. It's theirs. And the rivers will be flowing less and less over time, even without global warming. And the rice inside of China, I have never met a farmer. Have you ever met a farmer that won't eat what he grows? They have lots of farmers in China that don't want to eat what they grew. We have the freedom to eat what we want. We can buy our tomatoes from Chile if we want to. That's not true in China. If they opened it up and allowed people to buy from where they wanted to, the world food market would change dramatically. They don't want to eat the rice they grow. They do not want to eat that rice that they grow, particularly down in those areas that are heavily infested with cadmium toxicities. Since I've written my book, I've got experts that have come and talked to me and said, Milo, the situation is much darker and grimmer than you depict in the book. I thought it was fairly grim. I don't care what we've got in Arkansas. They would rather eat anything out of Arkansas than out of Hunan province. Did I make my point clear? But they're not free to do it. Here's why water is so important and why China's going to import more and more grains. Watch these statistics. If you own an agricultural operation in the south of California, you need to be aware of all this, okay? Am I keeping you awake? I know it's hard to speak late in the afternoon. Water stress, 100 cubic centimeters per year per person. China's average is 450. As you go north, it gets worse. Water table down 30 meters in the last 20 years. 50% of the rivers are dry. And 50% of its urban water is undrinkable. I don't see what the solution is. I really don't. If you look at the activity of the 6 major commodities that India exports, it's been varied due to weather, monsoonal rains. I am talking to one of the largest dealers in rice in India, the largest investor in China, the largest company. I spent 2 days with them, and he said, within 5 years, India's going to be a net importer of food. Do you realize what that means? It's going to be bigger than China. So we have India becoming a net importer instead of what it is now as an exporter of varying types. And China's going to import more and more grains. I don't care what they say. You can't be self-sufficient if you ain't got the water. And it's not something that you want to use, if you don't want to drink it. We are at the turning point for rice. If you don't know anything else, I believe we're at a major trade turning point. And Nathan, to be honest, he said a lot of the stuff you were saying back in the 90s happened. I don't want him to promote what I do, but he's definitely price and everything. I think the price is going to go higher. I think that the 2 countries, China and India, are going to blank each other out, and there'll be a net neutral or maybe a net importer of rice. The 2 largest countries in the world with the 2 largest supplies of rice will be neutral or a net importer within 5 years. And it's already started. As I said, 6-7 million tons of rice are missing in India. I believe that from the people I talk to, the crop's below 100 million, which is another 7 million, and they've got 400 people now eating. And in addition to that, if that weren't enough, the price of energy has collapsed. It's like a full food program for the countries of Asia and Africa. They can eat more because they don't have to pay much for their gas. It's real simple. In this country, you go down to Walmart and you buy more toys for your kid. Over there, you buy more food for your kid. Okay, can you hear me in the back still? I'm trying to keep it real simple and move it on through. Okay, here's our forecast. We watch the daily prices of milled rice like every other broker. We're not a broker, we're an advisor. We also watch all the paddy prices. I didn't show all of the paddy charts because it gets very busy. Underneath it all is India at $8, $9. That's a subsidized price, it's not a real price. And we believe that as India retreats and their water problems get worse and worse over the next 5 years, their cost of paddy is going to start moving up. These traders are sourcing cheap paddy and making a bucket of money. I've got basmati dealers up in Austin that are buying jet planes. They're not doing badly right now, because they buy cheap and sell dear. In between is some paddy prices for the U.S. and an indicator Thailand. On the paddy basis, we're competitive, not on the mill basis, because our cost of milling is less. They built a lot of milling capacity with fiasco, $20 billion traded hands. They built all kinds of mills. They're much cheaper at milling right now than the U.S. is because of that. You still hear me in the back okay? Okay, I'm gonna move very fast. And basically, we think the whole level underneath it. And as India recedes as a cheap dealer in rice, listen closely, and China buys more rice, they will pull the market up, not down, because they're $20. If they cut the support price in China for rice, they won't grow the stuff. And then they've got a real pickle. But they got to keep moving it up because the labor costs are going up dramatically. Labor costs in China are now 30% higher than in Mexico, 40% higher than in Vietnam. And their water costs, I already told you, are going to have to rise. Now Asia has the opportunity to let the water costs go up because the energy's gone down. Will they do that? I don't know. They're already cutting energy subsidies in Indonesia and in India. So it's underway even before this fiasco with the crude oil price. This crude oil thing is going to change things because cotton has got fibers synthetic fibers, soybeans have biodiesel, and corn has ethanol. None of this for rice. Rice is not connected to energy the way the other grains are. It'll march to its own drummer. I think world trade will recover well as India and China recede as a market force, except to be a buyer, and we'll get a little more demand. So maybe some of that additional stocks that I see taking shape will start to move into channels that weren't there before because of changes in the Asian market. Okay, 2 slides and I'll finish. This is for the long grain guys, not the medium grain guys. Sorry, you don't have a futures market. It's not my fault, okay? It's just a fact. Okay, oats have gone from 50 million metric tons a year in 1970 down to 25. It's a dying grain because there are no more horses, there's no more draft animals. It was used as a source of energy for pulling things. Wheat and rice are the big food grains. They're moving up quickly. It's a bull market in production of wheat and food grains, of wheat and rice. They're both at about 700 million. They went from 300 million in 1970. It's a production bull market in both commodities. In addition to that, in Chicago, wheat trading has gone bonkers, okay? Now I'm going to show you the next chart, and I want you all to ask the question, what does this mean for me in Arkansas? Crops. What I did was I took the size of the physical crop of short red winter wheat, soybeans, corn, oats, and long grain rough rice in the US and divided it through by the turnover of the exchange in Chicago. And nobody, as I talked to a guy that trains people today, no one's ever seen this chart before. And I got it courtesy of USDA for the statistics and the Board of Trade in terms of volume turnover. This is not options, it's just futures. Wheat turns over 278 times. Short red winter wheat turns over 278 times. Soybeans turn over 64 times. We're talking volume measurement. The bitch about, the problem with markets is volume. It's nothing else, okay? Corn, 25 times. Oats, 14 times. And rough rice, 3 times. Rough rice turns over 3 times in the year. And yet I already showed you that it's a huge market. So I leave you with a question that I won't answer, but you should think about and ask your broker and ask your friends. Why is rice futures volume not just less than oats, but 1/4 of the volume of oats, which are dinky? We're not at all like wheat. Thank you.